This podcast is made possible by Vena. Hello, welcome to Planning Aces. On today's show, we'll be featuring the FP&A insights and commentary of three finance leaders, including CFO Kevin Rubin of Alteryx, CFO Jonathan Carr of Armis, and CFO Patrick McClymont of Hargerty. This is Jack Sweeney, your co-host, and we're pleased to have Ben Murray joining us as a guest host and resident thought leader as we together seek to highlight the takeaways from this distinguished group of planning aces. We'll begin after this. Managing multiple spreadsheets, disconnected data, numbers you just can't trust. Your finance team can't be the strategic partner your organization needs right now with obstacles like that getting in your way. Vena can change that. Vena brings people, processes, and systems together in a single collaborative analytical platform so you can drive connected business planning and better decision making. And it's the only native Excel complete planning platform built for Microsoft 365 with Power BI embedded. With Vena, your financial and operational data is always connected and your teams are always armed with insights and time to focus on what matters most. So when the stakes are high and the margin for error low, plan with agility, plan with resilience, plan with Vena so you can be prepared for whatever comes next. Visit venasolutions.com/planningaces to learn more about how Vena will help you plan for anything. Hi, it's Jack. Welcome to Planning Aces. I'm here with Ben Murray. You don't know who Ben Murray is? I imagine many of you do. Ben has had multiple CFO chapters on his finance leadership resume. His most recent was as CFO of Cartograph, where he occupied the office for more than 7 years. And oh, by the way, along the way, this is interesting, he began a podcast. That's right. He entered this realm. His podcast is known as the SaaS CFO. Maybe it occurs to you now you've heard of him. And of course, that's where I first learned about Ben, as did so many others. I was excited when he accepted our invitation to join me today as guest host. Ben, welcome.
Thanks. Great to be here.
And I should also mention that you climbed really the FP&A ladder. And I should mention you served in multiple FP&A leadership roles prior to entering the CFO office. You know well, clearly, the long hours so many FP&A roles demand. So, as is our approach, I went ahead and shared with you some of the comments of the three planning aces we selected for this episode. And we always look for a common thread that we can sort of pull out as a unifying theme. I'm wondering if anything came to mind for you as you reviewed the clips, or one thing that these planning aces and finance leaders might have in common.
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing, looking at the SaaS metrics, looking at unit economics, and looking at metrics in aggregate, and then segmenting based on how you manage your business. So I saw a couple common themes within those discussions.
Well, it perhaps says a lot that I think our first planning ace actually touches on everything you just highlighted. Our first planning ace will be Jonathan Carr, CFO of cybersecurity firm Armis. Jonathan is the former head of FP&A for SurveyMonkey. Back on episode 852 of CFO Thought Leader, Jonathan shared a story with us how back in 2008, he was only 18 months out of college when he became assigned the accounting and finance lead for a major software implementation for Stryker down in Puerto Rico. So he relocated down there for a number of years. Great kickoff story for us for that episode. And what you're about to hear is Jonathan providing us with sort of a download of his thinking on FP&A and metrics. Here's Jonathan Carr.
Yeah, I think that the numbers and the metrics that I primarily focus on are first and foremost going to be related to growth. And that was true the day that I came in. I think throughout all of my years, one of the things that has been clear to me, growth certainly at this stage, and in particular for us in cyber when the market is evolving so rapidly, that is the number one thing. And so how do I get a pulse on that? Obviously, from a lagging indicator, looking at the business we close in any given period is great. But what I look to indicate, should I be adding more fuel to the investment fire or not? I spent a lot of time really looking at, among our tenured sales reps, what does their productivity look like? Does it look like I'm getting the right return for the investment that we're making? And in a high growth environment, that's often muddied when you look at things in the aggregate picture, right? When you layer in all these new regions or all these new folks that you're adding in, it's really hard to see the productivity. And so you really got to double down into the things that are going to prove out the unit economic model. Are my reps going to be productive enough? Am I getting the gross margins on the deals that are going to suggest that I'm going to have that path to profitability down the road? And in the beginning, those were the two main things that I looked at was, how do we ensure we're on the right growth path? And how do I ensure that we're getting the transactions that are coming in at that productivity, at the right gross margin? You have those two things, that over time you can get to your path to profitability that you need to. And certainly in the environment we're in today, there's a lot more focus on path to profitability. And I think as I've spent time with investors and as I think about how our team is really thinking about operating this business, it's not so much, how do I get to a point where I'm cash break even tomorrow? That's wonderful. That's great. I think that's coming. But what's more important is, how do I make sure that I'm growing at unit economics that suggest if I'm putting $1 in, I'm getting 4 back. And in a market that's evolving and growing rapidly, I see no reason to shy away from our ability to do that and get that kind of return. And I think that's consistent with what investors are telling us.
Is there some number related to that, to the unit economics, that you realized you need to expose earlier in the process so people can correct the ship? Or
I think early on, especially as you join small organizations, the data with which you have to kind of make a lot of these decisions can be muddy. So you start with some of the aggregated things in the belief system. And I'm a big believer, you don't wait for perfection to drive decision making. You come up with the things that you want to ultimately measure, and you start working towards that, and you make decisions and you learn along the way. I think one of my early mentors used to say, I reserve the right to get smarter. I'm a huge believer in that. I make a decision today. Next week, if I learn something new, fine, I'll make a new decision. That's okay by me. And so I think really just, we onboarded reps, for example. We looked at a handful of things. What are the regions for the business that are seeing success, where there's a customer need and a willingness to buy? And in the first 6 to 9 months, am I seeing the activities that suggest this person might be successful? Obviously, in enterprise sales, regardless of the industry you're in, those sales cycles and time horizons, they take time. So early on, you're going in with an investment thesis, and then you're looking for the things that are going to prove that out that you can fine tune.
Jonathan covered a lot of ground, and it was great ground. I mean, he talked about growth metrics. He talked about sales rep productivity and those success factors to know that your sales rep team is ramping successfully. Of course, in 2023, he talked about the path to profitability and how important that is. ACV size on new customers coming in. So there was a lot of great information in that clip.
I found it interesting that he really didn't waste any time before going right there, in terms of sales productivity. Are my reps, he asks, being productive enough? Am I getting the gross margin on the deals that keep us on the path to profitability? I jotted down just now listening. What about that? What about sales rep productivity being measured today? How are organizations taking this on? And are they getting to the nitty-gritty? Are they really getting the visibility they need?
Of course, CFOs and SaaS, we like to look at our SaaS metrics, our unit economics, and CFOs work so closely with the sales and marketing team, and we like to push on them, fair or not. But really, maybe they don't know, we do look at sales rep productivity in aggregate and also at the rep level, just like Jonathan mentioned. I had a slide on sales rep productivity, where they are, where's their pipeline, is it increasing since the last time we reported? So knowing the nuances at the individual level, if doable, depending on the size of your organization. We're also looking at the details, the mechanics of our go-to-market engine as a CFO to make sure we understand the health of that.
And that slide that you have has been around 5 years. Do you think most SaaS organizations have that kind of visibility? Where are they? Are they there? Have they been there?
I think if you're above 10 million ARR, most likely you have that visibility, or maybe 20 million and above, you probably should have that visibility at the sales rep level. Less than 10 million, early stage, still you're seeing founders, right? They're doing the sales and then they're transitioning to their first go-to-market team. So they're just learning that repeatable process as far as their GTM motion. So maybe not there yet. We just want sales and somewhat effective sales. But above 10, 20 million, I think that's a pretty standard slide.
I enjoyed his comments towards the end there that data can be muddy in the early days, but don't wait for perfection. You got to learn along the way.
Yeah, love it. So yeah, I'm looking at my notes here and I wrote that down. Like small orgs, the data is muddy early on. And really we have to have the right metrics at the right stage of our business. And first, it's always the accounting foundation, right? We need the proper chart of accounts. We need the right P&L structure for our industry. And so it starts with that foundation, and then we build upon that. For early stage, LTV to CAC, for example, for SaaS, not going to mean too much. It's going to be just too volatile of a number. We need enough volume of data moving through our business to make it meaningful. But yes, I work with a lot of early stage SaaS companies, and the data is always a bit volatile, a bit muddy. And we work with what we can and make meaning out of the numbers that, again, are the right numbers, metrics for our stage of the business.
Let's stay on sales finance collaboration for the moment, but step beyond SaaS and SaaS companies to other industries where this go-to-market conference table just is not yet engineered the same way as or enjoy all the visibility that SaaS companies today enjoy. I'm sure there's many CFOs who would tell us, I wish I had that slide in my deck. It's just not there quite yet.
Yeah, definitely. I was in the airline industry, then got into software, and it depends on the industry, right? In the airline industry, you're not calling up customers to say, "Hey, book a ticket today." Maybe those corporate clients. So the go-to-market motion SaaS can be so foreign, I think, to other industries. And yeah, go-to-market motion, working with those sales and marketing teams, there's so much data trapped in SaaS companies that we have to leverage, especially in sales and marketing. All this lead data, everyone who's hitting our site, downloading white papers, submitting their email for the newsletter, and all this data starts growing, and it's hard. It's really hard. And it does take a framework and experience to manipulate and use that data, and so I think a lot of departments face this, just a lot of data, and we don't know what to do with it. So it definitely takes time to perfect the data and how we use it within the go-to-market motion.
I just keep having this image of a newly hired CFO coming into focus that has joined a mid-sized company that was perhaps privately held for since it was founded so many decades ago. And the CEO is thinking to themselves, I finally have my strategic CFO. Little does that CEO know, or that CFO perhaps has an inkling, if he's going to become more operations minded, if he's going to play this role of that, he's going to have to really assert himself with the department heads and get them cooperating. I mean, I think that's a scenario that's still playing out in real time today. For that CFO, it's all about trying to establish the visibility, creating that type of visibility by having other senior executives understand that it's a data-driven world today. And while I've never had my CFO step into my office and ask for those numbers before, it's time to hand them over.
Yeah, I mean, that CFO sales marketing relationship is so important, and CFOs are so operational today. Really, I can't do my job effectively if I don't understand the operations of the business and the operations of the departments within my business. And out of all the departments within, say, a SaaS company, the folks I talk to the most were sales and marketing, because we're investing so much in the go-to-market engine there. So we have to understand, we unfortunately have to be a bit nosy, and that relationship has to exist between the CFO and the CRO, or the VP of sales, or the chief marketing officer, that we have to understand what's happening in their business so we can be effective and provide some guidance, because CFOs are here to enable and facilitate and also push back when necessary. So it's an important relationship. And if you think, yeah, SaaS really wasn't SaaS even maybe 20 years ago, maybe it was the ASP days, that now maybe that relationship wasn't there, but now we have so much data, that we have to get involved. We have to help them with all the data that's running through their organization. So really, that relationship has to be open, that I need to explain to my marketing and sales leader why CAC is important, why payback is important, and also why I need to understand their lead flow and how that flows into their pipeline and opportunities and closed won.
Well said. And thank you, Ben, for taking a deeper dive on that with us. We're going to tee up our next planning ace, who is Kevin Rubin, CFO of Alteryx. And just in short intro for him, the implosion of the dot-com bubble, the collapse of Arthur Andersen, and the September 11th terror attacks, each in their own way contributed to the future trajectory of Kevin Rubin's finance career. It was a convergence of events and circumstances that even today, Kevin Rubin finds difficult to untangle. You won't want to miss episode 860 of CFO Thought Leader, and allow Kevin to share his story with you. Right now, we just want to have him share some of his thinking around the metrics. Right now, we're going to share some of his thinking regarding the metrics and planning approaches we feature on this podcast each month. This is Kevin Rubin, CFO of Alteryx.
The number and depth, I guess the sheer number of metrics and the depth of those metrics have extended pretty significantly over the 7 years. When I joined, we were barely measuring, basic SaaS metrics, but the ones that we did measure, as I mentioned, were pretty incredible. We were looking at things like net expansion, and we didn't focus as much on ARR at the time, although we were a subscription business and always have been. So, billings is a reasonable proxy. But all of our metrics that we focused on early on were either customer dynamic metrics, as I mentioned, things like net expansion. We did look at LTV to CAC internally. We looked at a lot of productivity metrics. We didn't have as much telemetry insight as we do today. So how are customers using the product? Where are they deploying? What type of use cases? So we've really increased the sophistication over the years on really that intelligence around how customers are using us, where they're using us. We don't get to see any of the data or aspects of what they're doing in that sense, but we really do get to understand how they're using the product, which capabilities of the product are most interesting. And then we've stood up in recent years a specific organization whose entire mandate is working with customers and prospects and defining the ROI they're getting from using Alteryx. And so we get a lot of insight from that. That's our value engineering group, and we get a lot of insight there. So I would say the depth and maturity of the analysis that we're able to do today is significantly greater. The segmentation, the way that we can truly drill into a specific cohort of customers and understand behaviors, whether that's regionally or vertically, however you want to kind of slice it. We have an amazing ability to go in, and we also have the good fortune of being able to use Alteryx to do a lot of this work.
You mentioned the value engineering group. Are these data science? Who are these people? Who is?
No, this is a customer-facing organization. It sits within our go-to-market group, and it's, again, as I said, its sole mandate is really to work with organizations that are current customers or looking to be customers and help them define for a given anticipated use, what do we think the return on the investment would be from Alteryx? So they're certainly analytic minded, but it's not necessarily a data science team. We do have quite a bit of data scientists in the organization that help out in a variety of ways, but the value engineering group is really tasked with pulling together in a very understandable way. This is your investment, Alteryx. These are the sets of use cases and ways in which you're using Alteryx, and this is the benefit and the ROI that you're receiving from that.
Okay, well done. Kevin Rubin, CFO of Alteryx, touched on a good deal once more. Ben, I have a few items I'm hoping to talk to you about that Kevin touched on, but I don't want to influence your opening thoughts or what your takeaways were.
Yeah, it was great. He talked about some core SaaS metrics. He talked about net revenue retention, LTV to CAC, just those core metrics that really every SaaS company at scale should be measuring. And then I thought it was really interesting talking about sophistication around customer product usage. And that's so important. We have to also understand what makes our customers successful as they progress in that through our product. What actions are they taking? What triggers? What influences do we have on that from tech support, from customer success? So not just talking those core financial metrics, but also the usage of the product and that sophistication. And then he talked about segmentation and cohort analysis. So of course, talking core metrics, but I thought the product usage was really interesting.
It's about, he of course used this phrase, which I do ask him about, the value engineering group. It's a customer-facing group that sits and go to market. But I did ask him when it began, and apparently it's only a few years old, something that got put in place, and it doesn't report to him, but it's a sort of an organization. A similar group would we find in most SaaS organizations today. And again, I guess it's part of the go-to-market, but a little more sophisticated.
Definitely. If he has a department or a team dedicated to customer and prospect ROI, how are they going to use that product, that use case, and what ROI they'll get out of it? I think definitely more of a larger org function. Earlier SaaS companies maybe don't have the luxury of the budget for a team like that. And that could be for earlier SaaS, like a product marketer, that we're looking for so they can understand what we're doing in engineering, how that translates to the customer, and translating all that technical stuff into a value proposition for our customers. So I think that's probably the luxury of later stage SaaS.
Okay, I just want to increase our intelligence around how customers are using us. And again, okay, you've been mentioning customer usage. Is this like the frontier where finance leaders are seeking to extend their lines of sight as quickly as possible? There's like a land rush. What would you tell us?
I think, we could talk about an hour just about this. I think product usage and embedding the analytics in our product, the frontier was probably 5 years ago when that really became popular. Now, of course, we know PLG, product-led growth motion. We have to understand product usage. How are customers progressing through our product? And where are those gates? What can we unlock? What are those expansion opportunities as the customer progresses in our product? So now you could say the frontier with PLG and product usage and understanding customers' actions and intent to push that expansion revenue into net revenue retention revenue that everybody's talking about with the PLG motion. So I'd say, the frontier right now, PLG plus product usage and how we can really leverage that customer data.
Okay, I'm going to repeat that as my takeaway. PLG plus product usage. Thank you, Kevin Rubin, for highlighting that for us. Ben, we're going to move to our next planning ace. It was only last September that Patrick McClymont, having served earlier CFO tours of duty at Sotheby's and IMAX, stepped into the CFO office at Hargerty, an automotive enthusiast brand that first took root as an insurance agency for collector automobiles, but today serves the auto enthusiast realm using a menu of membership programs and experiences. Now, when it comes to entering the CFO office, Patrick McClymont tells us he likes to arrive in August or September, but no later. We'll have him explain. Here's his clip.
This role I started in September, which is right around the kickoff of the planning season, right, for the next year, which is great. You certainly don't want to show up after that. Maybe you want to show up a little bit before that to get your feet wet. But what I focused on, part of it is just understanding the team, the finance organization, and trying to meet with people, understand the scope, understand the role, what works, what doesn't work. So there's sort of that diagnostic around the core finance function. And then I try to invest heavily in building those relationships with my peers on the leadership team. At Hargerty, the way that works is we have presidents who run our insurance business, our marketplace business, and our membership, media, and entertainment business. And they're driving the outcomes, right? And my job is to make sure they've got the right resources. And I can't do that until I understand their business and their challenges, their opportunities. So I try to aggressively invest in building those relationships so I can kind of get up the learning curve. And then for me, it was using the planning process as a learning process for me, which was great for me, and maybe it's more challenging for other folks. But when you're going through the planning, you get to be in that room with everybody and go through in detail and ask all those questions. And so I really just try to invest heavily in, all right, how do I learn? But at the same time, what are my quick intuitions and my quick reactions? What do we need to change, right? This is the opportunity. If we don't agree on what we're doing next year now, it'll be much harder to change on the fly. And so that was sort of the balance I tried to strike. Learn, but also influence quickly. I go back to my time at IMAX. And so when I was hired at IMAX, the company was coming off of 2 very strong years in the midst of a third. They had just taken their Chinese business public in Hong Kong, and that had produced a bunch of capital. And the mandate for the new CFO and why they found me attractive, it was going to be external. It was, look at ways to drive growth, add legs to the stool, acquisitions, partnerships, those kind of things. In my first handful of months, I did the sort of normal onboarding and diagnostic. I also joined that in August, and so went through a planning process, which was helpful. And then early in my second year, so I was sort of 5 months in or something, myself, along with the CEO, Rich Gelfond, we kind of were looking at the numbers and noticed that some of the trends were moving against us. And I went back, did a bunch of work on it, and came back and sat down with him and said, look, I know the mandate was X, but I'm concerned. How do we think about sort of an early warning system? Like, what do we use to make a decision? Are we still headed in the direction we wanted to be, or are we pivoting here? And Rich had been there forever and tremendous intuition on the business. And so he kind of agreed where I was coming from and said, okay, look, let's look at the next 3 titles that are coming out, and we'll monitor our performance on those. And if we find that we're in a position where we're not on track, then let's have a real conversation. And he said, but go get ready for that real conversation now. Like, if we end up in a spot where we need to pivot, let's start working on it. And for me, it was sort of the moment was, okay, I was hired to do one thing, feels different. And always remember, the numbers don't lie, right? Like, and that was the framework that Rich and I came up with is, okay, look, let's just create a little scorecard, a short-term scorecard, and we'll hold ourselves accountable to it. And if the numbers tell us to do something, we're going to do it. And the moment was sort of, especially coming from banking, right? At banking, all numbers go up and to the right? And look, we all have sort of these strategies and narratives, and we're all biased to believe that, wonderful things will happen. And, in the finance situation, like, always remember the numbers don't lie. And ask your peers on a leadership team, like, okay, if that's true, whatever it is, if it's true, is it in our numbers now? When will it be in our numbers? And it's not about, there's a very constructive way to have those conversations, right? It's just about the initiative and sort of remembering that, ask those challenging questions, help people recognize that the sands can shift underneath us pretty quickly. And then from the CFO slot, like, you can't just ask the question. You've got to be willing to roll up your sleeves, dive in with your business partners, and help them figure it out. Like, what is the pivot we need to make, and how do we get at it? So that was the one for me, like that recognition that, this can move pretty quickly, and you've got to make sure that you've got the resolve to ask the tough question, and then the follow through to build sort of buy-in to what the solution is.
Okay, Patrick McClymont, CFO of Hargerty from episode 862, CFO Thought Leader. Anytime we have a finance leader shed a little light on the CEO CFO relationship, I always think it's always worthy to highlight somehow. It's pretty rare, to be honest. This notion of a early warning system, sort of an agreement with the CEO, I was compelled to make it part of an episode. That's good planning right there. What did you make of what Patrick shared?
Yeah, the early warning system, right? And I wrote down in my notes, he said numbers don't lie. He had intuition with the numbers that they were moving a certain way and just saw some red flags coming up that he shared with his CEO. And he went back to his team to do some homework. So once you're in the seat long enough, you just have that intuition. You see cycles, you see seasonality that just helps you interpret those numbers even better. And that's what he's explained. Like he was looking at the numbers don't lie, and they're not saying the right thing. We've got to go back and do a little bit more homework.
I thought it was interesting, like the planning season is the learning season for him. And I'm wondering if you think organizations could use planning more effectively to train not just their CFO, but others. And maybe it's done all the time, but in your experience looking back, planning's planning, but at the same time, it does offer you an opportunity each year to really look under the hood. Do companies use planning? Are there different ways they could be using it to benefit the organization?
Yeah, and his comments about planning season really resonated because I felt the same way where he'd like to start right. He doesn't want to miss planning season and start as a CFO or as an FP&A professional right after they bake the budget because there's so much learning. You learn all the nuts and bolts, everything that's under the hood as far as what's going on in the organization. And of course, they're lovers and haters of the budget, but planning and budgeting done right, I think, is really effective. And I always felt budgeting really tests the operational knowledge of your leaders. Do they really understand their business, their departments, where the business is going? What resources do they need to support those corporate objectives, those business unit objectives? So in his clip, right, just talking like core CFO, FP&A technique and experience.
So when I hear the expression planning season, I just think of this one conference room that is just a succession of meetings after meetings after meetings after different functional heads and different parts of the organization come in to discuss their budgets. And the finance people are sort of staring across the table, waiting for the next one to enter. I'm sure it's done electronically. I'm sure there's better ways of doing it, though. It seems like we all know meetings aren't always the best most efficient way of educating each other.
Yeah, early stage, it could be more of I'm dictating what the budget is as the founder CEO, but later stage, I've done planning and budgeting at large public companies. And it's got to be a collaborative process. Now, it does start with high level guidance. Here are the high level targets that we want to hit, and we disseminate that out to our department leaders so they can understand where we're trying to go as an organization. And then, right, we pass the templates out, or maybe our FP&A system to gather all their input that comes back to the FP&A team. We create the first draft of the budget. And then I always like to meet with those department leaders. Why do you have this in here? Let me make sure I understand the resources that you need. What works, what doesn't work, that I can see from your inputs. So it does have to be a collaborative process, iterative process with those department leaders.
Department leaders who you used to meet with. And no, I'm just imagining there was a conference room during a certain time of year that you'd occupy frequently and try to have book the department heads to come in and sit down and talk.
I think for some people, yeah, it is like going to the dentist. I think, in SaaS, sometimes they do understand the process, what we're trying to achieve. When I was in the airline industry, it's also an education process. Yeah, they didn't want to sit down with me and look at their P&L and look at their budget because they may be operational rock stars, but it did make them nervous. They just didn't have that fundamental financial education to feel comfortable around talking about the numbers and what numbers do they need to put in the budget. So part of that FP&A process, there's a lot of education of those department leaders, really helping them through the finance and budgeting process.
Which brings us back, in my mind anyway, to finance sales collaboration. And before we go, I was hoping, Ben, we might just pick your brain a little more on that, the significance of that collaboration today between sales and finance. When does it work? What are the challenges? Any closing words? I'll put you on the spot as we end here.
Yeah, I think CFOs, they have to understand the sales process, the stages that the sales leader wants to take the process through, or the prospect through. Now, if they have a certain sales technique, am I going to really dive into that? Maybe not, but I want to understand how they're going to take a sales qualified lead and move it through their pipeline and the pipeline hygiene. So we have to, I think, as CFOs, understand that process. And sales and marketing leaders have learned from different orgs and different experiences on how they want to do that. So I think CFOs have to understand our go-to-market motion, right? Is it the traditional outbound motion? Do we have an inbound motion? Do we have a PLG motion? So again, CFOs, I think, really have to understand the process. Are we telling them what to do? Absolutely not. But we have to understand how their sales engine is working.
Okay, Ben Murray, the SaaS CFO is the name of the podcast. Ben, thank you for being our guest host this episode. Very much appreciated.
Great to be here. Have a good weekend.